All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to give people a few seconds to settle in. Looking forward to today's conversation, joining you all again. I saw some of you probably in the fall, and I'm very excited about the two guests that I have today. So let's go ahead and get started. I think at this point, anybody who's going to join us is in the room. So good afternoon, good evening, and good morning as your time zone suggests. My name is Uche Amechi, and I'm a lecturer on education here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So welcome to Education Now, a webinar series designed to respond to the dramatic changes in the education field, particularly in the wake of COVID-19. And in today's conversation, we'll discuss the engaging topics of race, racism, and equity, look at how educators and school leaders can navigate this work, and consider ways to support educators and families in the current climate. As usual, today's episode is being recorded and will be available to view on our website at hgsc.me/ednow. That's hgsc.me/ednow. Of course, you can always visit our YouTube and Facebook pages as well. As we're discussing, you can submit any questions you may have using the Q&A button, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And while you're there, you'll notice that you can also access closed captioning. All right, so now it's my pleasure to welcome our two speakers for today. So first, we have also on the East Coast, I'm in Somerville, Massachusetts. Daren is also on the East Coast with me. We have Daren Graves, who is a faculty member at Simmons University and the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And one of his HGSE courses, Professional Educators, centers on schooling for critical consciousness, a topic that he also explored in a recent book. Hey, Daren, how you doing?
Happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And then I'd also like to welcome Rosa Perez-Isiah. Sorry, I try to practice this and that's my mistake. Rosa is actually 3 hours behind us. She is coming from the West Coast. Rosa is an experienced education leader and author who has long worked to advance equity and social justice for students and communities, most currently as the director of the Elementary Education, Equity and Access in the Norwalk, La Mirada Unified School District in Los Angeles County, California. Welcome, Rosa.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So we're going to jump in right into the conversation with Rosa and Daren. I have a few questions for them. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier on, you can jump right into the Q&A and ask some questions. I don't guarantee that we'll be able to get to all the questions. We only have 30 minutes, but we'll try to get through them throughout the conversation. So before we get to some of the tensions in teaching about race and equity, which is the topic for today, I want to first get at the why and the how of teaching and learning about race and equity. So to either of you, maybe we can start with Rosa. Why do young people, and all people in fact, need to learn about and be able to talk about issues of race and equity?
That's a great question, Uche. When I think about teaching and learning, an important thing to remember about children especially is that they need to make sense of the world, and they need to make meaning of what's happening around them. And we know that these last couple of years have been really challenging for students and staff. But we go back to seeing what's happening around them, and whether we want to admit it or not, they are making their own sense of things. They are participants in this process of teaching and learning, and it's important for them to be able to express, to have an opportunity to share and to learn and to ask questions to help them make meaning of what their current reality is.
Thank you. Thank you. So Daren, anything you'd like to add? I think Rosa is making a great point about race and equity are part of the reality. It's not something else in addition to. Anything you'd like to add?
100% agree. I come at this sort of trained as a developmental psychologist. And so I'm really, as Rosa was saying, really, thinking about the world that young people are coming into, all the messages that they're absorbing, right? And I'm also, I come at it as a parent as well, so I understand that people are concerned about trying to protect young folks, their innocence. And I understand that. And I also understand that young folks are absorbing this, whether we like it or not. And so it's really about us as adults thinking about how to scaffold a process for them to understand these issues. And I think even more importantly, ultimately to feel a sense of agency about these issues. In other words, to feel a sense that they can do something about these issues that are around them. And I think that's the goal that I think I'm trying to help educators and parents and anyone who's working with young folks really aim for is a sense of agency that's built, on a critical understanding and a sense of critical hope, right? A sense that we can do this, that's rooted in a critical analysis of what's going on in the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Daren and Rosa. I think it was very important to kind of establish this important why and just get that out there. So now, given what you both just said, what is the role of educators? What do they need to know, be able to do to support this work? Maybe we'll start with you, Daren.
Yeah, I think what do they need to know? I think what they need to know, they need to become a student of their students in a lot of ways. They need to understand, they need to learn about the lives and communities and context of their students so as to better contextualize and make relevant whatever it is they're trying to teach their students today, right? And so it's having more of a reciprocal kind of teaching and learning process with your students is going to better position you to get a sense of what it is that they know, what assets exist in their communities and in their homes, right? That we can work from to help teach all the core academic skills and other things we want to teach along the way. I would also say that we'd want to try and help, building on that is trying to develop a sense of personal authority with students. I'm sort of contrasting that to positional authority, right? In other words, a sense of authority that's rooted in deeply caring about the students, a deep knowledge of the students and their communities, an authentic desire for them to be able to be authentic authors of their own futures, which is in contrast to an authority that's rooted in, positionality, right? Or hierarchical nature, right? I'm the teacher, I'm the adult, do what I say because of those issues. Rather, I'm saying we need to develop the kinds of relationships with students to be able to develop a more personal authority kind of relationship with them, to be able to, because I think that's going to be an important type of relationship and disposition we need to have with students as we help them understand these difficult issues and then position them to feel a sense that they can do something about it as well.
I love that. Relevance, relationships, authenticity, and really understanding the context to be able to kind of make this information real for them. Thank you so much, Daren. Rosa, anything you'd like to add?
I swear that Daren and I didn't compare notes prior to starting this conversation. A really important piece for us to understand is that teaching and learning is about relationships. And if we don't know who our students are, then how can we educate our students, teach at high levels? When we don't take the time to understand the things that are important to our students and what is impacting our communities, especially students, Black and Brown communities, students in poverty, then how do we effectively teach? How do we provide students with exactly what they need, which is equity, providing individuals with what they need to be successful. On another level, our students come to us with rich language, lived experiences, knowledge, all that we can use and leverage and to support them. And when we don't acknowledge those pieces, then what we are essentially saying is that I don't value those things in the classroom. I am teaching, learn it, and let's move forward. And I know that our teachers don't feel that way. Our teachers want to make those connections with students. So tapping into those funds of knowledge is a responsibility for the teacher. The other really important piece is that this work begins with understanding who we are and what our beliefs are, because we know that our beliefs impact our behaviors in the classroom. And if we understand where we stand, what our biases may or may not be, because we all have them, then that helps us in the classroom, in the boardroom, in the district office, truly understand what we're doing and how it impacts the growth of our students and community.
Is it okay if I just add one more thing
Go
onto
for
that?
it.
Because this is really important, and there's some great questions in the Q&A that I'm seeing. And just to be clear, that the work that we're talking about is not a diversion from, you know, the learning and teaching of core academic skills, right? It's actually a means to do it, right? And a means to get students actually motivated to engage in those learning activities. And so for those of us who are concerned about whether these kinds of activities are going to help, you know, students be able to read better and, you know, write better and do math, yes. And you know, I will put the link in the chat at the end of, you know, a book that, you know, my colleague and I, Scott Sider, wrote called Schooling for Critical Consciousness, where we display many different practices where students were learning these important skills, the academic skills, while also gaining the dispositions to understand these key issues and to be able to feel a sense of being able to do something about it. So it's not a diversion away from those learning and teaching those core skills. It's a means to teach them maybe even more effectively and get in ways that motivate students even more so as they see the relevance of these skills as they're taught in context, if that makes sense.
No, thank you, Daren.
Daren,
And go ahead.
I'm sorry, Uche. I was just thinking, I know we have a lot of great questions. It is, I want to really emphasize that relationship piece. And when we build connections with people, we learn about the whole person. And that includes things like race and gender identity. And it is not, in my opinion, so controversial because it is part of who you are as an individual. And if we don't acknowledge that is who we are, then we're denying part of someone's identity and someone's belief system. And we know that influences their ability to learn. And in my mind, it is not so controversial. In my mind, it is really about validating who we are. And those conversations do include race and this idea of being color brave and dismissing the idea of being colorblind, because we all do see language, race, ethnicity, identity. It is part of a beautiful thing. It is part of our identity. So I can't say that enough. I need a balloon or a caption here that says relationships matter, because really it is about that.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, I mean, both of our speakers have really kind of resonated on that relationship piece, the relevance piece, and the fact that it is fundamental to how students, like just talking about race and equity and learning about race and equity is fundamental to how students can learn. But based on some of the questions that I'm seeing, and also Daren, something you touched on, a question that I think you saw about whether perhaps focusing on race and equity either works against or works with learning about, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic, so to speak, or whether, to what Rosa you said about it not being controversial because this is fundamental to people's reality. There are tensions. Maybe that question is an example, or other tensions that perhaps you're seeing in your work. Can you talk about some of these tensions that either you or you know that educators are running across? Rosa, you want to go for it?
Sure. You know, I don't see education being truly education without an equity lens, because we don't want a system that is cookie cutter and that everyone gets the same thing and everyone has the same needs. And I know across the country, for example, in another state, teachers are being asked to present their lesson plans very early in the school year, by a certain date. And I wonder if teaching sometimes, well, not sometimes, teaching is very organic. And we base our instruction on the needs of our students and community. How are we predetermining what those needs will be months or a year in advance? And that is a difficult position to be in. It is really hard to be an educator today. And this is my 28th year, and I feel it. It's a constant battle to highlight the incredible work that teachers are doing, the incredible work that principals and school leaders and district leaders are doing. And it almost feels like this constant battle. And it's puzzling to me because we are in a position where we can change the future, and we should be uplifting and supporting and empowering teachers. I think education is the key. If we are planning a year in advance what we're going to teach the students who we don't know yet will be, then are we really understanding the process of learning? Are we really understanding the process of teaching? If that's the case, it's, and I'm sorry if I didn't answer the question completely, but it's a hard time for us. But we take our cues from data, and it's hard to argue with data, whether you're looking at academic results, social emotional learning, and the needs of your students, staff, and community. It really is hard to deny that data, and I don't see how we can plan that far in advance. It really is dismissing the needs of our staff, our families, and our students when that's the case. And that's a tough position that some teachers are in today.
No, definitely. Thank you. Some great points there, specifically around, I don't want to say censoring, but like people coming in and trying to edit what in advance before knowing exactly what the context is going to be, who these students are, what they're going to learn. Daren, to you, either within the school building or coming from outside the school building, any tensions that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the tensions, to be fair, are being stoked by people with pretty cynical kind of political aims. But I also think that there are educators and their families who have, I think, reasonable concerns or questions about what's going on. Like, what is this going to be about, right? And so I think I will start off by saying that, part of the work that needs to be done in general is to be, in communication, really in partnership with families as we think about, how this work should be done. So let me just get that out of the way. So that's one. I think two, there is concern about politics mixing with schools. And I think that makes sense. But I think there's a difference between, the political and partisan, right? Partisan, yeah, that's tough. I think doing the partisan in schools is very dicey and not where we're trying to go. I don't understand schooling as anything but political in a lot of ways. Like, we make kids go to school by law. The reasons we make kids go to school by law, we're trying to have an informed democracy, right? We want people to know to be able to see the world around them, to be able to make informed decisions, so that so that these elections and other things that we do make sense, right? And so, there are political reasons to do school, right, that we can't avoid, right, for a variety of good reasons. And so getting our students to understand what's going on around them and being able to do something about it when they get the chance is part of that. I don't see that as very radical. So there's that. I also think that there's concern that this is an exercise in making white students, white children in particular, feel guilt and shame. And that's what this is about. That's just not what this is about. We really need all students, particularly white students, to feel a sense of agency to do something about these issues. So I, as an educator on many different levels, if I'm really interested in like dismantling racism, making white people feel, unbearable shame and guilt would never be the path to make that happen. So that's just not what the goal of this work is. And this work's not about dividing children and dividing people. This is about, yes, it's gonna involve discomfort. You know, learning is discomfort from a psychological perspective, by the way. But it's gonna involve discomfort, but it's not to just make people feel discomfort. It's to make people feel discomfort and work through it, right? So that we can make, you know, because democracy, this country is a process, it's not a destination, right? And so this is about equipping ourselves to do the work that we're always going to have to do, no matter, you know, when we are in our history, to, you know, continue to make this country a better place, right? And so this is about equipping us with the skills and the will to do that.
Yeah, no, that's, as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing kind of, I like to bucket things. So like you started off by saying some of this stuff is just cynical, like intentional, willful misunderstanding, but some might be genuine misunderstanding. Like, I don't understand what CRT is. I don't understand that, or whatever. And some is just lack of knowledge and people wanting to actually understand what's going on. It's not even that they got to the point where they're misunderstanding. And that's powerful. And to be able to kind of figure out where people are coming from, again, understanding the context, I think that's like, that takes a lot of will and a lot of leadership. Like, it seems like we're all on the same page. We really understand, like, this is important to do. But what are your thoughts on what would be your recommendation to like a school principal or like a school leader to try to address some of these tensions and some of these pushbacks? And I'll start with you, Daren, and then Rosa, I'll ask you if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm sure Rosa has a way better answer than I do, but I'll say two things. I think one is we have, as a leader, I'd have to convey the message, right? That the status quo, that the way that things used to be, right, is really sort of a non-starter on like so many levels, and particularly because that the status quo causes and continues to cause a lot of discomfort, right, for students of color, right, and other marginalized students. So it's, we're not that going back to that doesn't really make sense. And not to mention, we're just in the 21st century and we have to really reimagine schools for a lot of different reasons. And we've seen that over the last 2.5 years. So that being said, I think the other thing that I would argue is that we have there's many ways that this work is really rooted and connected to core competencies, standards, work that we're already supposed to be doing anyway, right? Again, this is not a diversion, right? And so I think if the leaders can communicate and help us understand that this, again, is like part of the work that we need to be doing, that the powers that be at the state and local level are telling us we need to do, like that this is part of the important work of teaching and learning every day, right? And so I think that's another key role that leaders can take in this.
Excellent. Rosa?
This work is about truth. It's about connections. It's about understanding. It is about acceptance, and it is a journey. And through the lens of a principal and director of schools, I know it's a struggle. I wrote a quote here to remind me. Frederick Douglass said, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." And part of the work that we're doing anyway as teachers and leaders is challenging right now. But when it comes to inequity or injustice, we often spend a lot of time talking about the impact of those things, but we don't spend enough time talking about the history or the causes. And when we're aware of those pieces historically, it helps us so that we can do better. I say this often, Maya Angelou, you know better, you do better. And some of the things that we do, it's just because we're not sure how. And our teachers are struggling with that piece. As a principal, we built a culture where we had conversations, we celebrated our differences, we tapped into those differences and experiences, and created a place where our community and our students felt safe and validated. And it isn't so much about critical race theory. I know about critical race theory because I learned about it as a graduate student. When getting my doctorate, never once did I teach about critical race theory in my classroom in K-12, and that's another misconception. Social emotional learning is not critical race theory. Another misconception out there. It is about supporting, again, the whole community, the whole child. So I would say stay focused, continue to create spaces where you are having conversations, where you are sharing accurate information, and where you can teach and learn critical thinking. Because isn't that the purpose of education, is to create critical thinkers? We're not feeding or indoctrinating our students. We are providing platforms in our schools where kids are coming in and they're telling you, if you've ever taught kinder, I've been a kindergarten teacher, they tell you everything. So kids are wondering and they have questions. And as an educator, I think it is important for us to create a space where students feel safe enough to do that. As a director, administrator, it is important for us to create spaces where we partner with our community. But it is also important to be safe and to have limits and boundaries. If at any time teachers or students are not feeling that way, then that needs to be addressed. But the whole point is that critical thinkers will ask critical questions, and that's not always comfortable.
And I love that you brought up the notion of the young children, the really young children, and you know, they are, as you know, sponges. They are making sense of these issues about race. There's research about this. The young folks understand these issues really early on, and some of the best conversations and the realest conversations about race are the ones you can have with really young folks, right? Because they wade through all the nonsense and cut right to the heart of it, right? So you can have some really amazing, true. I heard you say the word truth a lot. You can get to really truthful, deep conversation with young folks. So this is for students of all ages. Yes, there's different ways to do it that are developmentally appropriate, but all ages.
So we have 3 more minutes left, and there's kind of an assortment of questions that are asking about how do you deal with pushback from different stakeholders. Particularly, I see a lot about families, but also I heard different teachers and whatnot. So any thoughts, things that you've done in terms of how to respond to pushback from families? If you have any final words, I think we just have 2 minutes left. So if you can give a short response.
A short response. As a site administrator, I had questions from parents. Why do you have multicultural books in your library? Why does my student have access to certain material, certain books, and certain topics? And I would say to that, we have standards. We are teaching and supporting those standards, and we want our students to see themselves in our schools, and that includes seeing themselves in the text, in materials, in lessons. It is so enriching and validating, and that includes everyone. And we have to stay. It is impossible to stay away from race in the classroom, because look at our classrooms. We are all so diverse and wonderfully diverse, and not avoiding books that address race or don't have brown and black kids. I mean, this is public education. Sorry.
I'll just say real quick that this is about when we're learning about these struggles, we're actually not learning about people through the lens of victimhood or who's the bad guy. This is about learning about individual and, more importantly, community resilience and strength, right? And so learning about all these different struggles is about learning about the strength of communities and the strength of individuals, both historically and now. And that helps us just see each other in a more authentic and real way.
Thank you so much, Daren and Rosa, and thank you for sharing your expertise and your thoughts and some of the challenges that you're seeing in the world. Thank you all for joining us today for today's episode of Education Now. You can see the video and the recording of this conversation at hgsc.me/ednow, so maybe the site that you registered on. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And if you have any questions or anything else that you'd like to hear about, check out the website, and we will be sharing some of the links that our amazing speakers were sharing, either talking about today or shared in advance. So thank you all. Be well and be good to each other.